Good afternoon, everyone. Looking back at the tulip prices, 1636, 1637, a collapse begins across the planet. Prices rise. But rice in Japan and China, the Ottoman Empire experiences massive inflation for food. Even grain wages decrease at this exact time. Reason? The onset of the Maunder Minimum, a grand solar minimum, and we're into another one right now. A 5x increase in U.S. debt to $121 trillion by 2050 means hyperinflation in the United States. But fret not. Recipes that got you through the Great Depression and through the 1930s. In this day and age, it's so important to keep your body functioning at optimal performance. And collagen may be the closest thing we get to a real fountain of youth. After all, collagen is the most abundant protein in your body and essentially the glue that holds it all together. When you're middle-aged, you're only producing half of the collagen that you did in your youth. My focus is about digestive health because the change in our diets from foods being unavailable, moving to seasonal availability of foods, and the entire spectrum of availability of foods changing. There's so much more to talk about with the benefits of collagen. You can visit healthwithadapt2030.com to learn more. The link's in the description box below. We're going to jump through time in different continents. 1600s, starting off in Europe here. The South Sea stock bubble. The tulip craze from 1634. Amsterdam was abuzz about tulips, which became the hottest traded commodity. But 1637, something happened and a total collapse ensued in 38. So what was it that truly caused this massive collapse here? We see today in our own modern era, everything running, but it looks like it's on the precipice of collapse. And can we find something in the past that correlates to today that would be that trigger for the declines? I think we can. This Maunder Minimum here, deep cooling of our planet that affected agriculture. And just about 10 years before they really hit and crops were lost across the planet, the economy started to implode because food prices started to rise exponentially. That's the correlation. People were pulling their money out of the markets to buy more expensive foods. And as we enter yet another grand solar minimum, Maunder Minimum on the left there, also called the mini ice age, we are descending into the modern mini ice age, the E.S.T minimum. History is definitely repeating on this. So why don't we look in history and see what we can expect in the future? Inflation, hyperinflation. Look at 1620 to 1640 and then on into 1670. China had a monetary crisis. The silver coin exchange ratios spiking from 500 to 3,000. That's a 6x increase. Think about if your food was a 6x increase. What would that do to your spending and how would it dent the economy anyway? It's almost as if the economy can't be saved. People already know it, so why even try? And instead of doing exchange rates, why don't we go silver to the price of rice in China and Japan, 1620 to 1700. I included the orange box so you can see where's it centered. Oh, right over 1640 at the begin point collapse. Matches up with the tulip collapse as well. Looking at the rice price increases versus the land decrease. There's a little bit of lag time there, but you can see as food prices spike, people are pulling their money out, bankruptcies, shuffling of the economy, and then the land prices are lagging by about 10 to 15 years on this chart here. And this runs from 1450 up to 1700. But if we look in the era of 1640, 1650, what happens? The Ming Dynasty collapses due to lack of food production. I encourage everybody out there, just go to classical history of China and the Ming Dynasty and see why they collapsed. And when you read about how it's happening, you're going to feel that you're reading a newspaper headline edition from any of the online news services across the planet. Just change the names, but we still have the same events. Civil unrest, people unhappy, economic collapse, disparity of wages, changing weather, changing climate. There were fires, there were droughts, there were floods. We're just seeing it again. It's brought on by these grand solar minimums. And if we jump over to the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, I put the arrow again. High spiking prices Right through that 1640, 1650 era, you'll see some of the highest consumer prices through Istanbul. Isn't it coincidental that the same exact phenomenon was occurring in the same times across multiple continents? And to get a little more granular on the data here, grain wages. So instead of being paid in silver, you could be paid in grain, kilograms per day of grain. Why did it drop from 1600 to 1649? Same reason. It cost more money to buy the same amount of grain. It wasn't that the wages dropped, it was just the amount of silver to pay somebody. The wages in grain per kilograms got slashed. Just like we're seeing today, higher food prices. By the Christmas, you're going to really start to see food increasing very noticeably to the point where it'll be water cooler talk. Another great report here, which I've linked below in the description box, the great divergence of wages, prices, and economic development in Europe and Asia. I put the colored red and orange boxes in there, highlighting 1600 to 1649, the same collapse period of the Tulip decline, as well as the rises across Asia of food. But what you notice in the red are the declines from the previous 1550 to 1600 or 1599, which means the exact same thing. Prices are skyrocketing in terms of silver, so that same amount of silver can only buy a smaller percentage of the food. But where was this centered? From, say, 1600 to 1650, southern England, Valencia and Madrid, and Krakow. But if we go back even a further step, go from 1500 until 1650, and notice the trajectory downward in almost every single area across Europe. That's with rye and wheat. So something significant was happening from the Sporer minimum into the Maunder minimum here. Drilled down on prices on unskilled labor is what they're being paid. And there were so many more graphs in this report that you might want to dig in yourself to see what you can find to maybe put a greater, wider picture into what we can expect moving forward. So it appears that at the time, silver was being debased as well, as we saw during the Roman era, to try to catch up and put more currency into circulation to try to catch up with these food price increases. Well, we saw the end results across the last 300 years of history, especially 1650 to 1710, the collapse of almost everything, and then the resurgence again after sound money was reestablished and food started to grow. Well, we're going into the opposite. We're going into hyperinflation and less food across the planet. And the Congressional Budget Office here from the United States, as if the U.S. debt isn't high enough already at almost $27 trillion, they're looking for $121 trillion by 2050. That's 30 years from now, and they're going to add another $100 trillion in debt. Now, what do you think is going to happen with the U.S. dollar when they do that? This is absurd. The GDP for the entire nation, or how much we can produce in terms of dollar value, they're issuing 2.5 times the amount of debt per year moving forward. That is insanity. The only reason it's still functional is because it's the last man standing, while every other fiat on the planet is collapsing at the moment. But once the realization hits that actual sound money, cryptocurrency, gold and silver-backed assets, along with digitized natural resources issued on the blockchain, U.S. dollars finished. And the changeover is underway right now. The central bank digital currencies, the stable coins, distributed ledgers, and everything else to bring us onto a singular system with a single valued stable coin that can be used in any nation across the planet with the same exact value. That's where we have already headed to. Now it's just about bringing it to mass adoption across the planet. But these two things in history are resonating here. It took about 85 years for the Londoners to forget the tulip bulb craze and all of this happening. And at the same time, it's taken about 85 years for everybody in America to forget the lessons of the Great Depression. Even 2008 and 9 didn't shake anybody awake. And what do you see her doing here? Canning. This is going to be a key to you moving forward with a more abundant life. If you can buy extra food and vegetables at certain times of the years when it's in season, it's a plethora of baskets of produce for very cheap. You're going to want to get that, buy it, and then can it, just like they did in the 1930s to be able to store it, food all year long. Now, with that being said, I linked 2 articles here for you about recipes and foods from the Great Depression. Now, there's some great information in these 2 articles, linked in the description box below, of course. It takes into consideration basic ingredients available through different seasons or dried goods such as beans, flour, etc. Gives you the combinations to be able to create something so you're not eating the exact same thing every day, but adds a little variety, and you just need 1 or 2 extras, bacon grease, different types of meat, some eggs for some porridge, and there you go, some ham, whatever it is. And then the Taste of Home also had 34 recipes that got you through the Great Depression. So my greatest takeaway from this was reading all of these more than 50 recipes and finding the basics that covered all of them. You're going to be looking for the sugar, flour, dried storable beans, rice, this type of thing. So make the list based on this, and then you know that you can make every one of these recipes, at least 50 of them, so you don't get bored with the same foods, including potatoes, onions, all these types of things. So double check your list, get on out to the stores, start accruing these items right here, and you should be fine as we move forward through the next 5 to 10 years. Because as you see, history is definitely repeating or rhyming at a very equivalent tone at the moment. So how prepared are you for emergencies? My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, the 2-week or the 4-week emergency food supply. Give yourself the peace of mind knowing that you have storable foods in your home for situations just like this. The link's in the description box below. It's a great way to support the channel. I appreciate you watching. Hope you got something out of the video, and I'll see you next time.